My project, My Perfect Prospect, we go over the concept of star runs, which is a kind of an artistic idea that I've created as opposed to a scientific one, where throughout a player's college season, their best string of games versus high-level competition, an indicator of what their highest possible upside outcome. And Jarrett Allen, I believe, stands as the ideal premier example for this concept. As we can see, his tankathon profile, strengths and weaknesses, this doesn't look like anybody who should have ever had any success in the NBA. When this mediocre prospect most strongly indicated that he was this player at 19 years old, and this is his XRAPM, multi-year RAPM, 96th percentile, 29-year lifetime RAPM, 94th percentile, XRAPM, that's current day, 97th percentile. A player with apparently no strengths and a bevy of weaknesses shouldn't have been able to reach these heights. And this is how we can see here that Jarrett Allen was a very highly touted recruit coming into Texas. But I think what is also important here is that out of the top 19 players here, most of them played with at least one other player that was this high, like about half. And the ones who didn't have other teammates that were this good, they simply were on more competitive teams. The Texas roster that Jarrett Allen spent his freshman and only season was abysmal. We can see this is the 75th ranked team in BART that season, which for a high major team is, well, as you can see, if you go 4-14, that means that you're really out there playing very poorly. You are playing at the level beneath a really good mid-major program as well. While the team did perform very poorly during the season, Jarrett Allen, as a young freshman anchoring a top 25 defense in the nation, is an extremely impressive trait. And on a team with not very much offensive skill, team did not shoot three-pointers, did not pass the ball at a very effective rate, high turnover, and low assists. I think that is the worst three-point shooting team in the nation, and down there as well in free throw percentage. This was a very unskilled group, just not very talented. And Jarrett Allen, as a 18-year-old big through the season, was not given the most ideal ecosystem to succeed within. Here is how I start my methodology of including a star run, right? He went on a run of games from December 21st versus University of Alabama, Birmingham to Kansas State on the 30th, right? That's a good little 3-game run, right? The issue with this is that 2 of these games came versus mediocre competition. UAB and Kent State both ranked outside of the top 140 in Bardovik's team ranking system. And it's important when concluding when exactly a star run begins or ends that the player is playing against high-level competition. So a lot of guys, even right now when I'm recording this video, because the season just started 3 or 4 games in, there are guys who are getting their game off. Jake Wilkins, for example, at Georgia. Georgia has played 3 teams 300 or lower in team rankings, and he looks kind of like the best player or one of the best players in the nation right now. And this is simply not the case, as there's no rigor built into his schedule. So not only are we looking for when the player was successful, we're looking for when they played against high-level competition and put together a string of games without fail. So we could have went from TCU on January 11th to Kansas on the 21st. That's a great 4-game run versus 4 top 40 teams in the nation. But this was followed up by 2 really poor games versus Oklahoma and Georgia, who were slightly worse teams, but still very competitive. While there isn't an exact number of games that I look for a star run, and this is what makes it more of an art than a science. Some of the rare criticisms that I've had in presenting this in conversation to my peers is that there isn't an exact format. And I simply don't think it's necessary. to get the point across, because saying if a player has to play well versus competition for 8 games or 10 games in a row, I just need something. I just need a proof of concept as opposed to an extended period of dominance. Because as we're learning in My Perfect Prospect, there isn't really a perfect prospect that's come around yet. And with that, while I truly think it's important to keep standards high for the way that we evaluate draft prospects, actually searching for perfection is unnecessary. But with that, after the Georgia game where he played very poorly, shot 2 for 7 from the field, only drew 1 free throw, and had 2 turnovers. That's an awful game. Jarrett Allen did begin his star run at TCU on the 4th until his final game against Kansas this season. I believe that Jarrett Allen put together what I would deem a star run. From February 4th to the 28th, 122 players played at least a total of 175 minutes versus top 80 quality opponents. Of this group, Jarrett Allen ranked 25th in box plus minus, which doesn't seem as high as players who I've highlighted in this before, Zach Edey and Devin Booker, where over their, and Reed Shepard as well, where over their time period they were first or second in the nation in box plus minus. And that would be a lot easier to project those players as being truly elite. But box plus minus is not the only way to evaluate prospects, as we all know. It is, for me at least, the baseline for statistical prospect evaluation. If you only had 5 minutes to create a draft board and you had to think of how to do that, that would be the correct way to go about it. We have more than 5 minutes. We have all the time in the world. And with that, we can see that Jarrett Allen was second in 2-pointers attempted, and of the top 30 in attempts over this time period, he was first in percentage. Jarrett Allen was as effective of a freshman scoring big over this period as you will find, especially for one who is attempting a lot of non-rim twos, which for him were mostly hook. As well as that, he drew fouls at a pretty high rate and had 17 dunks, which ranked second. Both of these behind Jonathan Motley, who was a junior. We can also look at Jarrett Allen's defensive indicators, and we will notice out of this 122 player sample, he fouled the 7th least as a freshman big. That is pretty unheard of, especially for someone who, once again, was anchoring an elite defensive unit without a lot of talent around him. 4.4 block percentage. This is something that people hold against Jarrett Allen's profile, and even now that the block percentage is very low, but we can look at this strategically and say that he was simply told not to foul. As well as that, solid rebounding numbers and solid team defensive performance when he was on the court, which we've already went over. I think that is mandatory to understand to evaluate prospects properly, is that it is a team statistic. If your team talent is very low, there will be no box plus minus boosts just based off of team success, and there's no way to fully isolate a player from his team statistically. And this is why, as much as evaluating players is really fun and interesting, and it's you lose so much in becoming attached and fascinated to prospects as opposed to like team construct, because there's no way to remove any player, no matter how good or bad they are, from a team construct. So here we have all the underclassmen whose box plus minus was higher than Jarrett Allen's. Jarrett Allen's box plus minus relative to his team is clearly much higher than other players like Donovan Mitchell, Jason Tatum, Malik Monk, or Bam Adebayo, or De'Aaron Fox, who all played together, or even Josh Jackson. His +6 box plus minus differentials from their second highest teammate, and none of them did it as young as Jarrett Allen did in this season during his star run specifically. Another concept is worth mentioning for him is his free throw improvement as the season went on. Over his first 26 games, he shot 53% from the free throw line, which is abysmal and shows no indication of touch or offensive feel, along with a .8 steal percentage. If we query for guys who go a full season, sub 1 steal percentage, sub 55 free throw percentage, I'm sure that we get pretty disastrous results, especially with that turnover percentage as well. Wow, this looks really bad for the first 26 games of the season, which is most of the season, and it's not that we should erase. That's more than 75% of his season. But the final 7 games of a season from a highly recruited freshman big playing with a very poor team construct. If in their last 7 games, their free throw percentage jumps 14%, their free throw rate jumps, could indicate that they're becoming more willing to seek contact. Steal percentage increases this rapidly as well, while the turnover percentage comes down. This is turnover economy occurring in real time. Not to mention, hugely important factor, Texas played the #1 hardest schedule in the nation this season. Doing all of this in the most rigorous ecosystem with no out or help is how we end up with Jarrett Allen being as good as he is today. Another good example of why star runs are relevant as a point of direct one-to-one player comparison. Yves Missi was a pretty similar prospect to Jarrett Allen at face value, just around the same height. He was even a little bit taller, similar weight. He was a year older. That's not really a similarity that goes against him, kind of substantially, not super substantially, but it's notable. Similar great measurements, or similar great testing at the combine. Both of them had above average verticals and sprint speeds, as well as sharing identical standing reaches, where Jarrett Allen, outside from his star run being substantial and Missi's being much, much weaker with more team talent, is a +3 wingspan advantage from a player who measured 2 inches shorter. This is the difference. In Yves Missi's best 7 games on a team with other highly talented players in a system where the prospects outproduce their actual skill level basically at every step that we've seen so far. Scott Drew has players, turns mediocre prospects into good ones. Jarrett Allen was still better, and Yves Missi still performed in a rather lackluster manner. Outside of simply making every shot, which is a great way to boost your box plus minus, there was no playmaking, but the rebound numbers were just so much weaker for a player who is a year older and taller. And this is Yves Missi's best 7 games. You can go check for yourself. And his was versus top 150 competition as well, because he played against West Virginia during his best stretch of games, and wasn't a very good season for the West Virginia Mountaineers in 2024. I feel like showing this contrast further helps the case that star runs for otherwise similar prospects are a solid, useful delineator. Gonna be about it. I appreciate it. If you're watching this not in connection with my perfect prospects, my philosophical project on prospect evaluation, then you should also read that as well. But even just watching this as a standalone video, I hope still gets the idea across of identifying star runs in prospects. I appreciate your time. Thanks a lot.